you know, certain restaurants who are going to benefit from people being downtown. I know Nico's restaurant did, Two Steps benefited. I can't give you specifics, but so I don't have an actual testimonial from anybody other than Andre.
All righty, Jim?
Okay, I have, because Wayne said get 10 copies, I have 10 copies. But knowing also that that probably wasn't going to be enough, I have additional copies of just the one-page executive summary, so that if other people,
It's the same ones we have now, these new ones.
this is my stuff for you.
I should.
Anything else?
Oh, I see, this is your one page.
All the appropriate council people on it.
Do all the council members have one?
Just give us one here to share with you.
Okay.
I get also, like I said, I do have the one-page executive summary thing too, so should have known better than to not do 10. These are just the one-page executive summaries if anyone needs one.
Well, here, you have it. Well, sure.
Okay, good. You may have to-
Well, you know what, here.
You have to fill up some more.
Yeah, no, for that meeting, when that comes up, I have to.
Cal?
Okay,
We're short, the council person short one. Who's short one up there?
okay. Alrighty. I would ask you to open to the executive summary. Couple things, I'll just go down the items. First of all, if you recall last year in doing the survey, they were what I refer to as anomalies. There were a couple of anomalies, like one person having spent some $1,300. I didn't feel comfortable with that. I went through and analyzed it, pulled it out of the figures at that time, because I just didn't have a confidence level. We go through each of these surveys each time, and the first thing I do is I look at each survey individually to see if anything doesn't ring true. And then once I've pulled out anything that doesn't ring true, and we are able, by the way, just so everybody understands, we are able, I can tell where every survey came from, what IP address every survey came from. So I'm able to make sure there's no anomalies there as well. And just so everybody understands, there were 2 anomalies last year which were pulled from the surveying because I didn't have a comfort level. There were no anomalies this year. There was nothing that jumped out and said this isn't right or it doesn't work, didn't fit in. The level of which I have a confidence level on this survey statistically at about just under 92%. So last year it was about that too. I think it was about 93%. And that's based upon statistical analysis. It's based upon do I believe that the respondent information reflects the total, the whole, as it were. We need at least 200 surveys to have a comfort level that it represents the whole. If you don't get that level, then your percentage of certainty as to whether it's an accurate representation of the whole starts to drop dramatically. Okay, having said that, the number of surveys that were analyzed this year were 264 versus 2008 was 228. So we had more surveys this time than last. And of the respondents, the average total spending was $89.43 a person. That compares to $100.63 in 2008. One would expect that. I actually, to be truthful with you, I was expecting that to be worse, given the economic climate than it was. To only be off $11 a person, per person spending is not a lot. I mean, it seems like a lot, but if you think about what you're talking about, it isn't a lot of money. The restaurant's the same situation. Some of you have a, by the way, the restaurant spending is $47.19. I think some of you may have a sheet that says $49.19. That was an error, it's $47.19. And that's for 60, and that's $13 difference, which if you figure that over the period of the time, it's not unreasonable. I still have a belief that, like I said, I was expecting worse numbers than that as I went through that. So that's a good thing. One thing I did do differently this year, I was curious as to what was being spent locally on gasoline.
That's interesting, that's good.
And I thought it was an interesting number that on average the respondents had spent $15.68 on gasoline locally, which is kind of interesting because that means if they spent there, they might have also done a little other spending in the convenience store or whatever. I was just curious, so I pulled that data this time. It was just something I was interested in.
Jim, do we have any idea of how many people were repeat customers from the?
Yeah, I'll get down to that actually. The average number of films attended, 2.83 per person on the respondents versus 3.52. That's down, but I suspect that has more to do with the increased available product than anything else. There was much more product in this year's event than last year's event, buying for people's time, because in addition to the film, they did music, they did interactive media, and of course the workshops. So I would have expected those to go down. I didn't have an expectation on how much, but if you look at it, if you back it around the other way, the workshop, the average respondents attended 2.17 workshops. They were up from 1.89 last year. So more people attended workshops this year than did last year.
What was last year?
1.89 versus 2.17. And then if you look, rather modest numbers on the interactive media and the music events, which were the two new aspects. So there's nothing to compare them against. The next one is kind of interesting. 15.5% of the respondent attendees were from out of state. That compares to 14.9 last year. So the number of out-of-state visitors went up. And again, I was a little surprised. I expected that to take a little, because of the economics of coming from out of state, I expected that would hold level or maybe even drop a little. It didn't. And I actually did that like 3 times because I wanted to be sure I was reading it correctly. 38%, 38.7 were from Danbury, the city proper, and the balance, 45.8, were from other Connecticut towns. So what you're really looking at is 60% of them were from outside of Danbury. Okay. When they were asked how they found out about the Connecticut Film Festival, last year they identified over 30 different sources. This year, 28 sources, different sources. And that could be everything from websites to specific advertising, to posters, to friends, to whatever. They're asked to identify very specifically how they heard about it. And so that says to me that the festival is still doing broad-based marketing. If they had narrowed the marketing at all, that would have dropped, because the people would have gravitated to one marketing issue or another.
Were they specific, excuse me, Jim, were they specific as to the different sources at all?
Oh yeah. Look, the obvious ones were newspaper and web were the real top ones.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody really wants to I can pull the data and give you very specifics. But the top 2 were web-based and newspaper-based. And newspaper, and I did sub-break it out a little bit. Newspaper included PR aspects, in other words, articles, pictures, that kind of thing, as well as actual paid ads in newspaper and magazine. So there are a number of, and one of the anomalies for me when I'm looking at the data is that it is hard when somebody says newspaper, unless they specify newspaper ad. I'm going to go with the assumption that they went to the PR side, that they saw an article. Because people have a tendency, they don't say newspaper article, they'll say ad in newspaper though. Okay? And so you make an assumption because that's how people respond, that's how you interpret that data. Now, I was given the estimated day visits over 5 days of 6582, and then as you all know from last year, you have to apply numbers to that of how many people attended 1 day, how many people attended 2 days, and so forth. You have to apply the percentages. Once you're done applying to the percentages, the direct spending based on the respondents was $588,628. Does not include, again, and I never do this, and it may have some value down the road for you. I never put in what was spent locally by the organizers. In other words, if they contracted with a local place to do something, or they purchased food from a local restaurant, that's never included in this. One, it's very hard to nail down because sometimes it's spread over several different. You buy ads in to one company, and it might be some in locally, some not locally. So I don't put that money in there, but it's in the tens of thousands of dollars that is spent locally by the organizers. Then when we plug this in, and the one thing that I was curious to see is what are the economic impact multiplier changed, and it did not change it actually went up. It was actually 1.82 versus last year was 1.81. I just used 1.8, which is what I used last year, even though. And just so you understand what that is something called IMPLAN. That is a nationally recognized economic impact analysis where you feed raw data into it. It takes into account the location. And what we do with this one is we combine New Haven. It can be broken down as low as zip code. What we do is we take New Haven, Fairfield, and Litchfield County, and we take those three areas, and then that gives us what they consider the multiplier in each category is, and then a broad-based multiplier, and that's updated annually. In other words, I pay for the subscription to have that updated, those numbers, or those percentages updated annually. That's why it was a little bit of a difference, 1.8 versus 1.81 versus 1.82. And using that, we know that there's a multiplier, and again, I rounded out to 1.8 as the multiplier in terms of total economic impact. So everybody understands, and I did this last year, explained it last year, and most of you were here last year. Economic impact is the amount of time the money spends in the region before it leaks the region. And what that basically means is that money is still circulating in the economy when it's spent directly. If you remember, there's three: direct, indirect, and induced. Okay, direct is the $10. I hand $10 to somebody for a hamburger. That's direct. Indirect is the guy I handed somebody the hamburger to bought that meat somewhere. That's induced. That's indirect, excuse me. Induced, the guy I bought that hamburger from paid somebody to cook it and serve it to me. That's induced. So, and those are the three elements of economic impact. And that's where the 1.8 comes from. So that money will flow through the economy for a certain period of time, and then it disappears. And it goes outside. It's what they call leaks. Once it leaks out, and in this case, we use those three counties as the leak. because we figure that there's going to be a certain amount of circulation throughout those 3 areas. Some other interesting thing, and as you can plow through these things as you know, the bigger stuff, there's some charts, and there's cute little color charts and all sorts of lovely stuff for your entertainment pleasure. But you asked the question, if, you know, how many was a first-time participant in the Connecticut Film Festival? This is a fascinating figure, 76.5%.
First time?
First time. 76.5% was of the respondents were the first time attending. First time.
Does that mean 24% were repeaters?
24% would have been repeaters. Yep. The number of days attending, this one's a little better than it was last year, I think. I'm trying to remember, but 53% attended one day. Multiple days accounted for the other 50%. So there is some leg to it. It isn't just a one day for most, for about half of the people. It isn't just a one day thing. The next interesting thing to me, how frequently, at the request of City Center, I put several questions into the study regarding downtown. And some interesting things came out of it. You can look through it, you'll see more of that information whenever. I found kind of interesting, it says, how frequently do you go to downtown Danbury? And 1 to 3 times a year, 4 to 6 times a year, once a month, almost every week, daily, with the answers. This is my first time accounted for almost 25% of it, which that really surprised me.
Well, not if they're from out of town.
Yeah, but only 15% were from
Okay, good point.
out of state, and most of the out of towners were, you know, within a reasonable circumference of Danbury. I just was very surprised that there were that many that was the first time they'd ever been in downtown Danbury. The last thing, and I think this is really important to you as council people, we asked the question, which statement describes your downtown experience while attending the film festival? Very safe, somewhat unsafe, and not safe at all. 75.9 considered downtown very safe. 79.9%. 22% considered it somewhat safe. So if you look at very safe and somewhat safe, you're over 97%. And that probably would surprise a lot of people, because you get, as you get with any downtown area, people complain about 2 things. Well, they complain about 3 things. They complain dirty, they complain safety, they complain parking. And that's not uncommon to any downtown, any urban area at all. To see that show up on the survey, that was pretty impressive. And that meant that, and these are people that are wandering, that probably a good portion of them are not totally familiar with the downtown area. They're moving through areas that they don't know. For them to feel that they were safe, I think that speaks well of how things are downtown, as well as how the event impacted.
Thanks, Jim. Before we move forward, we had 2 other folks that came in. Andrea Gartner joined us, and I don't know the ladies.
Karina Dodo.
I'm sorry?
Karina Dodo.
Thank you, she'll see you afterwards.
She's programming director.
Joe Cabo just came back.
I've been here.
Yeah, that safety statistic is something we can utilize to market the city in all areas too. It's really a real positive number. Somebody as an objective observer says that for us. It's not us saying it's safe. Now we have something to rely on as a statistic, as we do any event within there.
Paul?
Yeah, let me just echo the comment from Wayne. I think that Danbury is safe. I don't think there's any question Danbury is safe. And I think by objective reports and police reports, we have extremely safe cities. We do have a perceptual problem. There's no question about that. And we can work on that. But clearly we've got a safe city, which is a huge point in our favor. Jim, a couple of questions. I just want to clear up one point. You mentioned the survey does not include production costs locally sourced. Is that correct?
That's
So
right.
let's hypothetically, if the show's $100,000 and Tom sources 30,000 from Danbury vendors, that's not going to be included.
No, that is not reflected there.
Right, and the other quick question I have concerning the survey is the repeat versus new participants. 25%. It seems a little low to me. I mean, is that you know, we got 100 people last year, only 25 of them came back. Is that normal for this? Or is that...
Well, there's two elements to that. One is filmmakers, which there are a certain number, not a lot of filmmakers, but there were filmmakers that took the survey, that put into the survey. They are automatically not necessarily going to be back the next year. It compares with what was last year in terms of who had been involved in other of the film festivals prior to that. It's fairly comparative.
It doesn't jump out at you.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it didn't really do. There is one other element that isn't reflected in here that you should be aware of, because I had no means of measuring it. I don't want to speculate on it. There was an event that was held at the Holiday Inn during the time of the run of the film festival. That there were approximately 600 people that attended it, and the reason that event was held in Danbury at that time was because the film festival was there, because it was an industry, you know, a closed industry kind of a get together. I had made an attempt a couple of different times to see if I could survey those 600 people, because it would have given us additional data, and it just didn't happen after trying to do it several times. So it has, I would say that it would have only added, obviously, because it's 600 people, it would have only added positive to the side of the numbers that you're looking at. But again, I didn't have any data available.
I just want to add that event, the Film Industry Mixer, who we're working with again this year, that event, we started courting them 2 years in advance. And a majority of the people that attend that event are from the central and eastern side of the state.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom, I have a question for you, if I might. The statistics are all very positive, obviously. We knew that they were going to be positive, and that's a good thing. But the purpose of this ad hoc, as I interpret it, is to see what kind of funding the city can help you with this year. What sort of numbers are you looking?
Well, at the meeting on September 15th, I requested $65,000 again.
How are you doing with outside sources of income?
Well, I'm working with several different agencies and organizations, plugging away at sponsors, and also submitting proposals to sponsors, through the Connecticut Film Festival. One of the issues is the uncertainty of a date for the festival, what the city's going to do. So it's been kind of difficult to move forward on a lot of things, because I was supposed to get a decision in September. The committees were supposed to meet in July and August. So there's been a lot of delays, and as soon as I have a decision, I can move forward with something more solid with some of these sponsors that I've been speaking with.
Again, through the chair, just want to follow up where Councilman Seabury mentioned the $65,000. I'm going to refer this question to the finance director. Given we're only in November and we really didn't hit the winter season, and during our budget process, you made it clear to us that this budget is extremely tight. There's not a lot of wiggle room, so to speak. Now, I have to assume that the money is going to come out of the contingency fund. So $65,000 divided by 400,000, I think that's what the number is.
450.
Something like that. That's a considerable chunk out of that contingency. giving that if we had a bad winter, which I'm projecting we could have, given we have a lot of rain, that 400,000 could be eaten up very quickly for public works. Do you feel that, can the city afford the $65,000 at this point?
Well, as you know, we haven't budgeted, everything is spoken for in the budget. I mean, contingency is typically used for only those things that are surprises, like the snow during the winter, if it happens to be an extraordinarily bad winter, as you mentioned, we will tap that. We do have something in our economic development budget that we may not use, but that is not $65,000.
Just to follow up, do you feel that 65,000 is a contingency? Do you think that 65,000 is the best use of that contingency fund, or do you think that other areas in the budget could offset funding of this film festival at this point in time?
No, that's a decision for the council.
Your opinion?
In my opinion, it's too early in the year to be using money like this for certain things like that. But that's, I'm working quite long hours to make sure we maximize our revenues and minimize our expenses. So, I defer that question, quite frankly, to members of the council.
We're still having the floor again through the chair. I think I made a comment before. I think the film festival is a positive for the city. It does help our downtown. It does help the city as a whole. However, my comment still stands. I think the city should be more of a partner. I think we should develop a matching program to see how much we can afford. I believe we should give some money, maybe through economic development. Maybe we can start off with 20,000 and we can go from there. We can cap it at a higher amount as it's coming in, and we can match dollar for dollar or something of that level. I think this way we're working as a team and not us being the sole sponsor as we have in the past. I know we're starting to do the 501c3. I think once that gets going, I think we can see a lot more revenue come in. I think we just got to start moving that a little bit faster. Though once that occurs, I think we're going to get a lot more fundraising opportunities will be becoming available to the festival. Giving it being a for-profit, a lot of people won't get that tax deduction. So I think it's important that we really need to look at this as a whole, not just as us being the major sponsor. So I think, hopefully by the end of the night, we should make a motion to give some funding. The 65,000 at this time is, with the finance director said, it's going to be real steep at this time, given the unexpected of what our winter season's going to be. But I think we can work through the economic development budget. I know we budgeted some money in there for a full-time director, which we know we're not going to be able to match because we have to do a year now. So there's money available through there, I believe.
And you can, you can probably do that in combination of what you're starting with on the contingency, but taking the whole nut from contingency is probably a bit aggressive, but using the economic development in combination with contingency is probably not a bad strategy. Right. 65 may be a little steep to do that because that's a lot of ground to cover. But again, like Tom knows, planning ahead is your best strategy. Knowing what you're doing far enough ahead, and that works the same way on my side. I can adjust a lot easier, for June 30th if I know now what I need to nip and tuck. If I need to cover X number of dollars, well, then I need to cover that.
So again, just to follow up with the chair, I think at this point, I think if we had a schedule of expenditures for the first 3 months, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, and then the city could fund the first quarter to help you get going, And then maybe keep the option open to come back to see where we are with our budget and see if we can add more, which will give you 6 months of fundraising opportunities. I think to commit that whole nut now could be a little bit steep at this point. And that's my opinion.
Jack?
If I could to Tom, through you, what percent, the 65,000 that we're looking to, that you're looking for, what percentage of your budget does that represent as far as your operation, if you will?
For 2000, excuse me, for 2008, it was approximately a third.
If I could, I only mention that because I know with the Ives project that we have up there, we had, the first year we gave you 50, is that right?
No, 75.
75. Because I know we did steps at Ives, and maybe that might be a direction we want to look at here also. It's all about getting you kick-started and jump-started.
That's kind of the direction that we are looking at. It would be decreasing support as the thing takes off. That's what we discussed.
And it was initially presented that when we first started talking,
Okay.
a couple years back.
Tom?
I
Jack,
just-
excuse me, Jack.
No, I'm good.
Oh, I'm
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment that we received, let's see, $50,000 from Connecticut Commission on Culture and Tourism. There was $50,000 that came in from the General Assembly. Let's see, we leveraged about, I think it was like $19,500 in hotel rooms for our hotel partners. I mean, the numbers go on and on. You know, the city was involved, but there were these other partners, there were these other grants and sponsorships in cash and in kind. The total of in-kind and cash total was close to $500,000. So, I mean, if you're talking about a budget, it's actually a lot greater, but in cash, it was closer to $185,000. So, I mean, HB Group provided $30,000 in sponsorship. It was all in kind, but that's a benefit to the city of Danbury because we couldn't buy it otherwise unless we had that in-kind sponsorship. So, I think it would be good.
Any further questions, comments, Paul?
Yeah, if I may, to the chair, to David. David, what have we budgeted for snow plowing this year? And how does that compare to years past?
Well, you taking into account.
Can you make it not snow?
How many numbers I got rolling around my head right now? We're going through an audit. We budgeted, let me answer your first question. We budgeted for a normal winter.
Thanks, that's all I need to know.
Okay.
You got those numbers now, Paul?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we cut a lot of areas in the last couple of months. If we had cut snow plowing to the bone, that's going to be an issue because we're obviously going to get some snow. But if we're kind of in the normal ballpark and we get a kind of a normal winter, we're not really going to have to dip into contingency. Hopefully. If we get hammered, we get hammered. I mean, this is a thing that we go through. Do we buy snowplow insurance? Nah, you say the 50, 75,000. So we're pretty much where we normally are the last couple of years.
Why don't we print money like the federal government? This way we'll never run out.
Through the chair to Mr. St. Hilaire, David, you mentioned economic development money. Do you have an idea about how much is there that we could pull from that account?
Well, we earmarked about $25,000 for the nutmeg page, right? If I'm not mistaken, that we know that we're not going to end up using. So we could pull that 25.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? This time I'd like to hear a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to present a motion at this point. I'd like to make a motion to fund the Connecticut Film Festival from the city's point of view to figure $50,000. If there's a need for additional funds, and they can, Mr. Cruz, come back to us with a notification that no guarantee that there'll be any additional funds presented.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any further questions, comments?
And move that we adjourn.
Second. Paul?
You and I?
Yes, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.